Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Rutledge, and I'm the MLA for Burnaby North and the chair of the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services, a committee of the Legislative Assembly that includes MLAs from the government and opposition parties. I would like to acknowledge with gratitude that we are meeting today in Williams Lake, which is located on the territory of the Shwekam peoples, specifically the Williams Lake First Nations. And this takes on a special significance today on National Indigenous Peoples Day, a day to recognize and celebrate the cultures and contributions of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in Canada. I hope all British Columbians will take some time today and every day to listen and learn, reflect and commit to reconciliation, and encourage others to do the same. Welcome to everyone who is listening to and participating in today's meeting on Budget 2023 consultation. Our committee is currently seeking input on the next provincial budget. British Columbians can share their views by making written comments or by filling out the online survey. Details are available on our website at bcleg.ca/FGS budget. The deadline for input is this Friday, June 24th at 3 p.m. We will carefully consider all input to make recommendations to the Legislative Assembly on what should be included in Budget 2023. The committee intends to release its report in August. For today's meeting, all presenters will be making individual presentations. Each presenter has 5 minutes for their presentation. We'll be keeping track with a timer, followed by up to 5 minutes for questions from the committee members. We'll also be keeping a timer. To assist presenters, there is a timer here, and it will count down the 5 minutes and then turn red and count up the second 5 minutes. All audio from our meetings is broadcast live on our website, and a complete transcript will also be posted. I'll now ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting with the Deputy Chair.
Hi there, welcome this evening. I'm Corinne Kirkpatrick, and I'm the MLA for West Vancouver, Capilano.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Harvinder Sandhu, MLA from Vernon, Monashee.
Hi, I'm Ben Stewart, the MLA for Kelowna West.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Dykeman, and I am the MLA for Langley East.
Henry Yao, MLA for Richmond South Centre.
Good evening. Renee Merrifield, MLA for Kelowna Mission.
Good evening. Mike Starchuk, MLA for Surrey Cloverdale.
Hello, I'm Brenda Bailey. I'm the MLA for Vancouver Falls Creek and the Parliamentary Secretary for Technology and Innovation.
Thank you. And assisting the committee today are Jennifer Errol and Emma Curtis from the Parliamentary Committee's Office, and Amanda Heffelfinger and Simon Delat from Hansard Services. And I will now invite our first presenter, Gail Wallen, to come to the table. Gail represents Invasive Species Council of BC. So over to you. Welcome, Gail.
Well, welcome, and welcome to the Caribou. We don't usually have rain and cool temperatures on this day, but hey, we'll go with it. You don't have all the bugs. So thank you, and thank you for coming and touring British Columbia and coming to towns like this. I'm with the provincial charity, the largest charity in Canada on invasive species, and we've been around for about 20 years. We've been working in partnership with provincial government and with many other organizations in BC. So it was interesting when I was looking at your backgrounds. You might think of invasive species being those rural issues like knapweed that ranchers don't like, feral pigs, but it's equally an important urban issue. And it's one that many people aren't paying attention to and don't realize it. And when we take a look at climate change, people don't think about if we get the new equivalent of an emerald ash borer or a gypsy moth, our forests will be defoliated, which won't allow them to cool towns. We'll actually lose carbon, and we'll actually have major impacts. Or the knotweeds that almost all of you have in your communities that are ruining your stream banks, which when you get a flood, which we tend to be getting, will actually increase the risk of the flood. And then I just did a tour with my board. We were looking at cheatgrass and Scotch broom. Some of you will know that from the island. Major fire hazards. So actually invasive species are actually linked to a solution. We need to reduce invasive species in order to make a difference to reduce the impacts of climate change. And most people haven't thought about that. They think about, a few things and think, oh, that's an environmental issue. It's actually equally a social and an economic issue. Invasive species cost us millions per year. in British Columbia and in Canada. They impact pretty well every natural resource sector we've got there and pretty well every urban park, particularly across the lower mainland and southern BC. Himalayan blackberries takes over your parks, you can't use it. Simple examples. I'm just trying to choose some of the topical ones that you have. So we're calling for 3 actions. One of them is to increase the investments in invasive species. We all know, just like we did with the virus, taking prevention is way easier than responding. So we're calling for a collective call of $15 million per year as part of your annual budgeting cycle. So not year-end surpluses, not sort of unplanned, and we'll see if we've got money if the new feral pigs come in. It's part of your annual planning. Most of the land is provincial land. We need to take action, and we need to make sure others are taking action. So that $15 million many research shows that investing in prevention will give you a 17-to-1 ratio return. And right now, you mentioned Indigenous Day here today. This is actually reducing invasive species is really important for our Indigenous culture and traditional practices because many of them have displaced traditional food practices. So really key on that as part of the core annual budget. So, and that would include funding both for within government, including your resources, and increased funding that will go out to partners like us who can leverage your dollars for efficient and rapid response, which we've been involved with, and many others. The second recommendation is you have right now 4 provincial pieces of legislation and others. You have different lists. Many species fall between the list. Many invasive species fall between the list. So we need to improve our regulatory tools so then next time we get a call about this spider, that snake, that whatever, we can say, well, it's actually not regulated yet, therefore we can't act on it. We need to have consistent, strong regulation that includes all the invasive species. An Invasive Species Act is one way to do that, or strengthening our current regulation, your choice, but we need to act on that. We need it to cover all species, and we need to make sure that the pathways are closed so we're not introducing new species that are sold in trade, which many invasive species currently are. The third recommendation is since the inception of our council and an invasive species strategy for British Columbia, we've called for an outside-of-government trust fund, and that's to enable funding for education, research, emergency response when government's short. So we were calling for $10 million investment in that. That would then be augmented by what we call an eco-fee surcharge. So we're taking a look at where the cause is. So things like a tire tax. Tires are major spreads. Maybe it's boats or vehicles, et cetera. There's a number of examples. So those 3 recommendations are our recommendations on behalf of a major consultative process to identify what's needed in British Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And I'll now invite members of the committee to ask you questions, and we have quite a few already, starting with Henry, then Corinne, and then Megan.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. And obviously in Richmond, knotweed and Himalayan blackberry bushes have been huge issues, especially now we can't even deal with it at this point, except it's like herbicide, which is something we also don't want to see in our environment. I have a question for your number 3 recommendation. You talk about $3 million invasive species trust fund. Are you planning with kind of partnership with local post-secondary institutions to ensure we have more of a comprehensive strategy to deal with that, including research, obviously?
Yeah, so that trust fund would be funding a range of research, and academic institutions are definitely one of them. So it's a multi-directed, there's multi-directed partners to guide it. It's based on the model I see you've got of the HCTF and other trust funds that we've worked with. So yes, funding going out to partners.
Perfect, thank you.
Corinne.
Thank you very much. Mine is a little bit along the same lines. So the first recommendation, so $15 million annually within the core budget. How will this be? So this is for new projects, operating funding. What do you envision that going to?
Provincial government right now, depending, I haven't got the current years, but generally you're sitting in the $6 to $10 million per year. You can't even tackle many of the species that are there. So you need more government resources in government, and you need the ability to partner with groups like ourselves or other partners who are making a difference. So that $15 million, you had 8 or 10 or 7 or 8 when you were just doing plants. You're now dealing with all species. So all our consultation has shown us you need to double what 5 years ago funding to grow it to 15 to be able to effectively manage invasive species across the province. So the answer is it's going to go inside government, and then you're going to be able to partner outside of government also.
Okay, thanks very much.
No problem.
Megan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I was just curious about the consultative process that you talked about for the presentation. today. When that was being undertaken, as you know, several of the farms were affected by the flooding recently. Was there an agricultural consultation in there? Can you tell me a bit about what you looked at through that consultative process?
We've sought input from government technical experts and from other organizations like ourselves that are invasive species organizations. They all have agricultural connections, but the need to reduce the flooding risk for communities that we've heard for years, particularly in the last 2 years when you're seeing the increased floods. So our consultation process was on the strategy, involved agriculture sector, and we're just starting a new one now. It's a 5-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda.
Thank you. And I'm interested in the current funding landscape. What does it look like? Because it's, I know you've done incredible work, and I've seen a lot of really great marketing pieces in regards to invasive species, and I'm wondering how that's currently funded and how that compares to the ask that you've brought forward.
So 2 things. The ask that we put in front of you is for British Columbia. It's not for our organization specifically. Mm-hmm. So it's what we've heard is an outside of government voice for invasive. So it's what government needs, everybody else needs. That's what we've heard. Mm-hmm. How our funding, which is what I think you're asking, is that our organization funding?
Well, more just how the funding envelope looks right now in addressing the question of invasive species.
I haven't got this year's funding from government.
Yeah.
We're just in the middle of doing some research to compile all the funding that was spent in the last 5 years, actually, from provincial government, federal government, local governments, First Nations, private sector, et cetera. We'll have that number. Yeah. But if I was to take an estimate, I would say you're probably sitting as a provincial government, which is the part you care about, you'll be sitting at 50 to 70% of that funding envelope now at the max. But it varies because often you use year-end funding to hit that target. And so therefore you're sitting there on March 29th, government nor us know whether you've got any funding available for 2023. It doesn't enable multi-year planning, which invasive species takes. So a lot of your funding comes at fiscal year end, not an effective way to manage something that's an ongoing concern.
Thank you.
No problem.
Renee.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Gail, for your very impressive and knowledgeable explanations. And thank you for being so quick on the answers. It's getting us lots of questions here. You said invasive species are sold in trade.
Correct.
Could you detail that a little bit for me and help me understand how that relates to the regulatory tools?
So if we were sitting here trying to remove yellow flag iris from lakes or purple loosestrife from lakes, or you can buy Eurasian milfoil in pet and aquarium stores and put it in your pet and aquarium tank. And then you may choose to dump it, which is what causes our problem. Or you can see in the horticultural trade, many species that are invasive species, your lists are outdated, so therefore they may not be listed yet, or they might be listed, but they're still in trade. We'll get calls, we inform government, X species, Scotch broom is being sold in this nursery. Makes no sense to sell Scotch broom, but that happens, and there's no enforcement. That's why whatever regulatory tools, enforce them, because one cannot be without the other.
Excellent, thank you.
I see that Henry has a second question, but we are running out of time. So with that, Gail, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for coming and presenting to us. And thank you for making the connection to urban areas. As an urban visitor to your area, I think I can say that we have thought of invasive species as annoying pests, not as something that it could be such a serious consequence.
They're your silent forest fire in your communities. Yeah. That's the way I would give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
And our next presenter is Michael Fowler, BC Wildlife Federation Region 5, Caribou-Chilcotin. Welcome.
Welcome, and welcome to you all to the Caribou.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you. The BC Wildlife Federation Region 5, we're hunters, fishers, and conservationists who strive to ensure the sound long-term management of caribou regions, fish, wildlife, parks, outdoor recreational resources in the best interest of all residents, using science-based management to ensure that traditional values of hunting, fishing, and gathering food from the land base are maintained and protected for all. and conservation is at the forefront benefit. Now, my first recommendation is dedicated funding for wildlife management. There needs to be a sufficient funding that is sustained over time, that will provide the requirements to fully manage our wildlife resources to meet the needs of the Indigenous people and the residents of British Columbia. Now, fisheries, we've got a system where fishing licenses and all that money goes into fisheries management. We don't have that for wildlife, and we'd like to see that. My second recommendation is habitat restoration. We need to put more effort is required to restore habitat after resource extraction. Resource extraction, by definition, basically, destroys the natural environment, and we have to restore it to improve wildlife populations. Our First Nations peoples rely on these resources, and so do we. You're from the city, it's not as major an issue for you, but we live on our game meat. There needs to be better and independent monitoring of natural resource extraction through an independent natural resources board. My third recommendation, let's go back to, let's get the right page here, is to implement the recommendations, the 2007 recommendations that were made in 2017 by the Provincial Chief Forester for the Quesnel and Prince George districts. Now, we don't believe they were properly introduced. The AAH should go down, and I realize that's going to hurt everyone, but we have to take this bite at this time so that we don't have to take a major bite in the future. We have to, the professional forester made the recommendations to reduce the cut after the beetle kill was basically defeated, and they haven't really implemented it. So we're actually over harvesting. That has effects on our rights. It has, well, I have one thing here. Where is that? The Yanni decision is the direct result of the provincial government over allocating resources, and now it affects the Blueberry First Nation, and that is what happens when the government doesn't follow science-based management. And the provincial forester, that's her job, is to advise on what is the best thing to do scientifically. And she said, for the long term, we have to reduce things. So thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions. Renee, then Brenda, then Henry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Michael, for your presentation. I'm going to drill down a little bit on the on your first two recommendations. You talked about dedicating funding for wildlife management specifically, and mentioned fisheries. So, are you referring to the hunting licensing fees and having that go directly back to wildlife management? And my piggyback on that question is, does that also then go into the habitat restoration that you were asking for as well?
Yes, the idea is that we would get an independent board set up like the Water Fisheries Board that handles the fisheries. That money, take all the money that comes from hunting licenses and tags and guide fees, all that money, and actually, we think that the non-consumptive users should also be paying some sort of a fee for the bear viewing opportunities, so that all that can be pooled up, managed by an independent committee or board of some sort, and disperse funds to ensure that the wildlife is properly managed and that the restoration monies are there when they're required. Now, for the restoration, we'd like to see, now it can go into that fund or it can go into a different fund, but the industries that are using our resources should be paying a greater royalty to manage the recovery of the damage that they're doing to our.
Thank you for that. That makes sense.
Brenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feller, for your presentation. And you actually answered my question, but I'll just take a moment, if I could, just to thank you, because I live in the heart of downtown Vancouver in Yaletown, and it's so important for us to hear the priorities that you hold in your community. And I will share with you that, surprisingly, I hear from a number of folks that care deeply about these issues in downtown Vancouver, and I think it's largely folks who've moved there from places like Williams Lake. So it is very important to us, even though I'm a city slicker. So thank you.
Thank you.
Henry.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate your dedication to our environment and the protection of our environment restoration. I would like to ask a question about recommendation number 3, because obviously you have a great emphasis talking about a scientific approach in regarding to forestry. I would love to hear, I hope and assume that you also welcome Indigenous leadership to step in to have a bilateral government-to-government decision-making process in hope to address the forestry needs.
Our position in BC Wildlife is we like a tripartite system. Because government is in a conflict of interest, because their government is supposed to represent the position of the First Nations and of the residents. And so that's where somehow we'd like to set up a tripartite system so that residents have a voice, are assured their voices are being heard by government. Government is the decision maker. So they're the statutory decision maker. In the end, they make the decision. So it needs to be a tripart. Everybody hears what everybody else's needs are. When you hear what other people's needs are, you're much more, it's not a positional, it's needs-based. It's not saying, we need 50% of this pie. It's, we need so much of the pie in order to survive, and how do we work it out? The best way would be to work it out to make a larger pie. But that's our position.
Perfect, thank you.
Ben.
Thanks very much, Michael. I just wanted to touch on the habitat restoration, because that is a big part. Mountain pine beetle did devastating things, and the government allowed, rather than just leave standing dead timber, they allowed companies to cut it at cheap and discounted rates. The magnitude that we have to go at this with is probably, I mean, it's probably not within the realm of the budget you've suggested here to get out there. And I'm just kind of wondering, what do you, like, as a local and knowing what the forest looked like around here and the visual quality corridors and all those little pieces that they left behind, what do you think that we have to do in terms of the magnitude of this? How big an undertaking do you see it to be?
It's a huge undertaking. The biggest portion that I see, and I'm over my time, but the biggest portion that I see is the extensive road network that went in to service, to get the logs to the mills. And those linear features allow predators to access the prey much easier, and they use them. And we have to dedicate money to restoring those roads so that they will be less used for the predators to service the prey. It's going to take 100 years for the forest to recover to the point where the caribou, for instance, will start returning to normal. And we don't have 100 years to wait for that recovery to happen. We have to do what we can to recover it now. Unfortunately, the method of funding wasn't incorporated in the expense at the time. So that means, unfortunately, we're going to have to take core funding and use it but we're going to have to recover that. You're probably all aware that caribou is a major issue. If we don't do it in this province, the feds will move in, and we have no say in what they do.
That's right.
So,
Thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you, Michael. We are out of time, but I want to thank you for your presentation, and I want to thank you for making us feel welcome in your part of the province. And yes, I do come from the city. My father was a hunter, and I grew up, game was a big part of my diet growing up. And so I think it's really important that people, like some of us around this table, remember our history and feel a responsibility and a sense of a relationship to the land. So thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all
you for
very
that.
much.
And our next presenter is Donna Barnett, representing South Caribou Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Donna.
And welcome to the Caribou Chilcotin.
Thank you.
To the rainy Caribou Chilcotin.
Really?
Yeah.
So whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'm going to talk about roads. I have 3 topics which we were asked to present. So for your information, the geographic area of the Caribou Chilcotin is 44,512 square kilometers. We have, according to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, over 1,000 paved roads, 1,700 plus gravel roads, which a couple of them are dirt. How long they are, the ministry couldn't tell me. I have lived in the Caribou region since 1967 and have never seen our roads in such poor condition. Highway 97, which is used to be called the Caribou Connector, is in pretty good shape, but I can't say that for the rest. The last 3 years after the fires of 2017, all of our other roads have completely deteriorated. Potholes, believe it or not, so big that you could probably go fish out of them. A strong capital maintenance program is needed and needed now. Cars bending rims and other issues to vehicles, damage is high. Is it safe to walk on many of our rural roads? No. Gravel is desperately needed on so many of our rural roads. Government says there's no money in the budget. Unacceptable. The gas tax was originally, I believe, put there for replacement and maintenance of roads. Much of it now goes to local governments for things like water, sewer, and bus stops. This money needs to go back into road capital. Our roads are not safe, and this is the provincial government's responsibility. I honestly have never seen anything like it. And you go on Facebook and the jokes are people sitting on the side of the road with their fishing poles. It has got to the point where it is costing people money to repair their cars. It is not safe, and it is certainly not safe for anybody to be walking out there. The next issue is health care. I have also never seen our health care in such dire straits in this region. Lack of doctors, lack of nurses, lack of lab technicians. The cost of fuel these days, people in Williams Lake are driving to 100 Mile for a lab test because they don't have a lab technician. It costs them an hour down, an hour back, probably $50 in fuel. And we've got to quit blaming everything on COVID. More training spaces need to be opened. It is great to announce new programs, new hospitals, but if at first you do not have the staff to fill them, there's a big problem. Capital for healthcare is one component and not the most important component. Operating is the other, and it is the most important. But somehow, over the years, cutting a ribbon seems to be more important. Mental health, there is none here and nowhere for people to go. Homelessness, substance abuse, all related and create more mental health, but yet only small bandages provided. Our crime rate is rampant, and most of these people are on substance abuse and have mental health issues, and we have no place in the Caribou-Chilcotin for these people to go. They put them in jail where they don't belong for a couple of days, and they're back on the street. The cost to our businesses for the crime is unbelievable and almost unbearable. The businesses are paying the brunt. When I hear it's lack of staff in government or COVID, well, no one got laid off from government during COVID other than emergency workers who would not get vaccinated. And I understand government has hired 130,000 new workers in the last 5 years, but yet we have no help. There is many more places government could redirect the taxpayers' money or cut taxes. Please remember, rural BC is where the wealth of this province still comes from, and it is time these needs were addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna, and I will ask the committee to ask the questions. Renee, and then Ben.
I think Ben was before. Okay, Ben, you go. You're first.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Tell us about railroads, and you've already told us about what they're not doing. I guess the question is have you seen this decline slowly, or is it something that is more, like you said, the 2017 or 2018?
Fires since then.
Since then?
Since then. And to the best of my knowledge, and I know a little bit about the region, the capital, not the maintenance, the capital, the putting new pavement down. Mm-hmm. Maintenance is one thing where they go and put the hot potash in the hole and 10 minutes later it's gone. We need new pavement, and there is no capital maintenance budget. I have checked it out, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing in the budget.
Renee, and then Harbinder.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Donna. This is eloquently put. I'm going to go to the roads as well and just ask, has there been any analysis done on the number that is required just for the Caribou in terms of capital?
There is no announcements. The only announcements that have been made that I know of and are for some highway work on Highway 20 out near Tatlioka Lake in the Chilcotin, and some on Highway 24 down in the South Caribou. We need gravel. I'd love to take you all for a ride on our gravel roads. The gravel doesn't exist. It's just mud and the odd bit of gravel. They are appalling. If you could hear the residents of this riding, I feel sorry for the guy that got my job, because I can tell you they still phone me and I say, oh, you got to phone him.
Just to clarify, actually, I was asking, do you know how much it would cost?
I don't have a clue.
Okay.
I don't, but I bet you if you put $10 million a year That wouldn't do it in 5 years.
Okay. So upwards of 10 million. Okay.
Harwinder and then Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Donna, for your presentation. I have a question regarding health care. We were in Terrace this morning, and I was talking to a nurse who told me that the situation, because we've added 100 seats for nurses and trained 7,000 care aides, she said having those extra staff really helped, and she said working conditions are much better than they used to be. And I come from healthcare background too, 17 years in BC, and I've seen it too, and witnessed many ups and downs. And also the Northern retention bonus, they were mentioning it's really successful. And even in TRU here in Kamloops, we have more seats added into all healthcare professional for them. I wonder do we know the sense of what is it that Williams Lake is not attracting under all these programs and extra seats and extra trained healthcare professional? Do we know why people?
We are not in Northern Health. We are in Interior Health in this region.
Yes, my apologies for TRU seats and stuff as well.
COVID took a lot because of no vaccination. We have lost doctors because, and I'm going to tell you the truth, whether you like it or not, there are major problems within Interior Health. Right. We have more bureaucracy, I believe, than we do some healthcare workers. The top down is unbelievable. When I was MLA, there were weeks when you didn't know who to call to get help for somebody. And they keep changing players at the bureaucracy level. And it is something that is creating nothing but problems. I live and I work with these healthcare workers. Mm-hmm. Doctors come here, they take their 3 years that they have to take when they come from another country, and they're gone to Ontario. I've watched the pattern. They stay here for their 3 years and they're gone. And I think it's an internal problem that is creating more and more problems.
Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate that. And I do come from Northern Health and then recently Interior Health, and I know there are some, a lot of questions that are unanswered. So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Mike and then Corinne.
My question was answered.
Okay, Corinne, we have a bit of time left.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry I haven't actually had a chance to meet you officially before. I'm glad to see you here. My question is about mental health, and I don't know what, if any, facilities support detox addiction recovery in this region. Is there anything?
There is absolutely none.
There's nothing?
There's nothing.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, Donna, we're out of time.
Well, thank you very much.
But I want to thank you so much for your passionate advocacy and bringing to our attention what is a very dire situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who's next? And our next presenter is Sage Gordon, Quesnel Cattlemen's Association.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name's Sage Gordon, and I'm president of the Quesnel Cattlemen's Association, and I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to present recommendations for Budget 2023. So our three recommendations are fuel, insurance, and garbage cleanup on range. Number one, fuel. We need to lower the cost of fuel so we can afford to do business. We can't afford to keep doing business with these prices. Our product just is not covering costs we're paying to do business. Having to pay carbon tax on dyed diesel as well as higher fuel prices in general is hurting ranchers. For many of us, fuel bills have doubled or better in the last 2 months, and it is not even haying season yet. Normally, fuel bills don't double until haying season. This is making it difficult to afford fuel to hay, which in turn is driving up the prices, or the price of hay, making it difficult to afford to buy hay to feed our cattle if we can't hay. It has also increased the cost of trucking, which in turn has increased the cost of supplies such as twine and parts, if you can get it. We have also heard rumors that fuel prices might go up higher this summer, which will drive up the cost of hay and haying, as well as trucking. The cost of fuel, having already driven up the cost of hay and supplies, has already put some ranchers out of business and made others make drastic cuts to their herds. And two, insurance. With the fires of 2017, 2018, not only has it made it impossible in some cases to get house and farm insurance, but it has driven up the cost of it to a point where it is almost unaffordable for some, and for some it is. They just can't do it. We need to bring rates back down. Some ranchers are having to choose between the risk of having no insurance or the cost of having higher premiums. This creates a problem. If you have a mortgage, you run the risk of having the bank or lender recall your mortgage if you have no insurance, which means you have to either lie to your banker or lender or pay the higher premiums. And three, garbage on range tenures. The problem of garbage on range tenures has been an issue for years. When we report it to the conservation officer, they only take note and suggest that we remove it at our cost because they say there is no money in their budget to remove it. We would like to see money allocated towards cleaning up garbage on range. We would like to have it set up so that either the conservation officers can be paid to remove the garbage or be able to hire someone to remove the garbage on their behalf. If we are to remove it, we would like to be able to put in a request for reimbursement of our costs to remove it. We would like to see those that dump the garbage be held accountable, whenever possible, for all costs associated with cleanup. The provincial governments, or provincial and federal governments, are continually complaining that we are losing many people in our agriculture industry and that no young people are coming into it. With the continually rising costs and taxes and the low return or zero return on our products, one might wonder if it is even worth the effort anymore. And as nobody wants to work for free or pay to work, such as we do in many cases, it is keeping young people out of our industry as well as pushing out others that are already in our industry. If the government truly wants to help like they say, we would like to see some relief on operating costs and taxes and better return on our products. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a number of members of the committee that have indicated they'd like to ask questions.
Certainly.
Brenda, then Mike, then Megan, then Henry, and we see what kind of time we have after that.
Certainly.
Hi, Mr. Gordon. Thank you very much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I had the chance to work on a cattle ranch in Kamloops for a summer, and I don't think there's anyone that works harder than ranchers, so I understand that. It's hard to hear how pinched you folks are at a time when food supply is so important to us, so thank you very much for making us aware of that. I heard what you said. Where's this garbage coming from?
Because people don't want to pay at the dump.
Oh.
They go out and just dump it because you got to pay by the weight or the truckload, so they just go and dump it on range. And of course, you know, you got calves and cows. Cows get nails in their feet or they chew on it. They're nosy. Calves are really nosy, so they end up eating garbage, plastic and stuff like that. And of course it plugs them up or poisons them.
Yeah.
And so we find, you know, it can kill cattle that easy.
I didn't know about that.
And it
Thank
costs.
you.
Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sage. And thank you, Brenda, for stealing my notes. Yeah. Illegal dumping is a problem, in other areas of British Columbia. I know in Metro Vancouver, they've incentivized the fact that people can actually get access to the landfills or transfer stations at little or no cost. So have they tried that here? Because, as you said, it's just cheaper to do it on your property than it is to take it to a landfill. Have they looked at this from that lens?
They have tried different incentives, but for the most part, they just say, well, whatever. And there is not really anything. They just say, well, if you see it, take pictures of it or clean it up. And if somebody's actually caught and you have license plate numbers, they may go talk to them, they may not. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. It's great to hear you talking about youth in this too, because it's such a concern with succession planning. As a farmer myself, I know we worry about the future of youth entering with so many barriers. And one of the questions I have is related also to the dumping that my colleagues brought up. How prevalent is the problem? Are you talking about like just piles and piles, or is it just sporadic?
Sometimes it's fairly consistent. Depends on the year. Sometimes it's lots of times if there's lots of construction, there's roofing materials, construction materials dumped. If somebody's doing renovations, lots of people have found piles of roofing materials or construction materials on site on their range, and I mean, you know what that's like to cattle. The shingles, tar shingles and that are toxic. Nails, rusty nails, I mean, it creates foot rot and other problems, so.
Okay, thank you.
Henry, then Ben, then Renee, and we may be cutting it pretty close after that.
I'll do my best to keep my quite short. Sage, thank you so much, Sage. I do apologize. I'm having a little cough, so I'm putting a cough candy in my throat right now. Beef BC came to Legislature to explain how ranchers and cattle ranching actually can be a proactive combat against fire season.
Yes.
And they're having have you guys had that conversation with the insurance company, say how we can utilize cattle and a lot of cattle industry?
Many times.
And there's still no consideration of cooperating and allowing you to have a low insurance rate?
They're still looking at it and considering it, but they're still like, it's not a real help, even though we've proven in many areas it is.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Ben?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sage. I just can't help but think about how difficult it is to kind of manage the fuel costs and all the other inputs while prices are going up. Tell me, is the industry able, like it's probably too early in this season to understand what the recovery is going to be like, but I guess if you have to draw a line in the sand and you just said, well, we can't produce it for that, what's happening at the buying end?
At the buying end, well, calf prices have dropped. If you go by Alberta prices, last I checked, we were at $2.16 a pound for calves, which doesn't even come close. With fuel prices up, we need at least $3.25, if not higher, to even come close to trying to break even. BC is usually lower on their calf prices, so by 5 to 10 cents a pound, sometimes even more. And with people, hopefully there's more hay this year, but how many can afford it? I mean, already the market got flooded this spring because nobody could afford, grass was slow coming and nobody could afford to buy hay. Auctions went from expecting at one point, about a month ago or a little over a month ago, auctions went from expecting 500 head here and in Vanderhoof to, by the end of the auction, here was, I think it was pushing 1,800 head and Vanderhoof was over 2,300. People were just dumping their livestock, trying to make something of it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think you told us the story.
Yeah, it hurts, believe me.
Critical mass.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Sage. We're out of
You're
time
welcome.
now.
Thank you.
But we really appreciate hearing the lived reality of the people who are on the front line of putting food on our tables.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our next presenter is Donna Campbell. Hi, Donna.
Hello. Welcome to the Caribou.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, mine is a little different vein. It's a personal matter. And I had my 75th birthday yesterday.
Congratulations.
So I'm probably one of the oldest people here. But I have written this letter that I'm going to read to all the MLAs in BC. And I really didn't get responses. I got the automatic blurb out saying, please contact your MLA, and which I had written in the beginning of my letter that I had contacted my MLA. But it makes me feel like nobody even reads what we write. But anyway, I'm going to read my letter, and you can make a decision on that. This I wrote in last October. I'm writing this letter to all the MLAs in British Columbia. I am the mother of 8 and a grandmother of 19. I have a 36-year-old son who has primary progressive multiple sclerosis. He was diagnosed in 2017 and went from a strapping 6'3" 285-pound young man who could practically lift a car engine by himself to 150 pounds and in a wheelchair. His legs don't work, and he can't really write anymore. He's almost blind. He was a journeyman millwright who worked well for his employers. He was given a lot of responsibility and lived up to his employers' expectations. He was well liked by all who worked with him. Last fall, he burned his leg from hip to knee because he poured boiling water on himself when trying to move a pot. It's a lonely life when you are a forgotten person, and even the government doesn't have things in place to be of assistance, especially when you live in a rural area. I have written to each of the MLAs hoping some of you will take this seriously and work to make changes. It would be great if, despite party lines, you could all work together to make these changes happen. Have you ever felt invisible? Do people see you as a person? When you need to go somewhere, do you need to consider whether you will drink anything before you go because you may not have access to washroom facilities? If you stumble and fall, do you find you can't make yourself heard and can't get up by yourself? What if your speech is garbled and people pass you by because they think you are drunk and they don't even consider that you might need assistance? When going somewhere, do you sometimes find you have forgotten something and then have to run back into the house and retrieve the item and then rush back to your car, jump in and drive off? A person who has a disability or handicap through accident or illness is not able to rush anywhere. They are often very isolated and unable to have a good quality of life. I have a list of issues that I feel need to be addressed. When a person is diagnosed with a serious illness, handicap, or disability, the doctor's office should have a social worker fill out all the forms for the patient so they would have access to any services available. Often a person is so ill that they aren't able to do this on their own and therefore don't get the help they need. A person who is disabled should be assessed on their income alone to see if they qualify for the BC disability. Often when assessed on their partner's income, they don't qualify and they are just above the level that they can't make it on the wages that they receive. If their disability requires them to have a special diet and health supplements, these should be covered. If the handicapped individual requires dental work, glasses, or hearing aids, these should also be included in their assistance benefits. Often the home needs to be fitted with special equipment to enable the person to remain at home, and the home should be checked out and these renovations should be done. This is still a lot more cost effective than putting them in a care facility, and they can be with family. Services such as acupuncture, chiropractor, physical or massage therapy, and visits to a naturopath should be part of the coverage. There should be finances allotted for a person to come into the home for meal preparation, household chores, and companionship. We never know when a disability will impact our lives, and we should be able to feel included and empowered to be full and equal participants in our society. Please put these items on the agenda of things that need to be positive changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have a number of questions. I'll start with Corinne.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And when you talk about feeling invisible, and that, I mean, it really does bring it home, the journey and the frustration. I just wanted to break it down a little more. We have learned a lot in the last couple of weeks with respect to support payments for people with disabilities and the issue with being looked at with the income of a partner and all of the issues that causes. For you, specifically with your son, the issues that you found in this community, are they also related to a lack of professionals for therapy and healthcare assistance? And for your experience specifically, is it those?
There really is no help. And you are absolutely invisible. Like on our taxes where we live, we pay for Handy Dart, but it doesn't come out to where we live. And healthcare providers, like healthcare workers, when you have to pay them traveling time, if it takes them 45 minutes to get to your home, 45 minutes to get back, and you're allotted a 3-hour session, well, you only have an hour and a half. And they don't lift, they don't do housework, they don't do meal preparation, they do nothing. Well, I can go and sit with my son and talk to him for 3 hours, and I won't charge anything. And so this is very, very costly for people.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have also heard about the need to have other medical supports and things covered on medical. So thank you very much. I'm taking too much of my colleagues' time, but I do appreciate you.
Brenda, then Megan, then Henry.
Really appreciate you telling us your story, Donna. Thank you very much. And it's a lot at 75 to be someone responsible in this way. So I really I appreciate you affecting all of us by sharing your story. Thank you. I do want to explain a little bit, if I could, just that because as an MLA you get so much mail that we kind of have to divide it by region. But we do have folks that help with particular issues. We've got a great parliamentary secretary on disability issues. If you haven't had a chance to connect up with Dan Coulter, we'd like to take your story forward to him. That's a person that would really be helpful to you, I think. So if you'll allow us, we'd like to go ahead and do that.
Oh, yes, that would be fine.
Thank
I
you.
can leave my letter here if
I'd
you would like to.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Megan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Brenda mentioned what I was going to say to you, which is that when the emails come in, they're divided up by postal code. And with this letter and your submission today, we do have the ability to take that forward to the ministry. I do also want to thank you for sharing the story. It's an incredibly frustrating process to navigate. I know my office has heard from several constituents who have come in with the same types of concerns about income, waiting, and so on. So these are concerns that are shared widely, and definitely as MLAs we hear a lot about. So I do, though, want to thank you for bringing that forward and echo what Brenda said, that we would love to take this forward to ensure that it gets to the ministry for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Henry, Harwinder, and Ben.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story. And it's a really great reminder that behind every number we look at, it's a life full story that we need to actually pay extra attention to. My question is specifically asking about better at home services. Have you accessed better at home services, or is there any kind of challenge that you've been facing in regards to that?
We have tried. We have tried also, personally in our home, we had our son for 5 weeks, and it was a full-time job because he needs to be fed and different things too often. And we just couldn't get help. We tried and we applied, and the nurse, we went and spoke to a doctor, and he said, you could put him in Dunroven. And I said, yeah, but we don't want to put him in Dunroven. That's a senior's home. And a lot of people there don't have any mental facilities left, they would kill him to go there. And there is no facility available, like, for people in his category. He's only 36 years old. Like, yeah, and it's been a 5-year process, but it's a very, very, very quick, bad MS. And it's like he's a shell of himself. But he's still mentally there, so far. But he is going blind. And so it's not good. And we have tried, and nobody seems to have any help, or not really much concern either.
Okay. Sorry, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're out of time, and there were other people that wanted to ask questions too, but we are out of time. And on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you so much for sharing your letter and sharing your son's story. I'm sorry that the system has so failed your family. And I guess I just want to conclude by saying that one of the things that our parliamentary secretary on accessibility reminds us about all the time is that we are all temporarily able.
That's
that this,
right.
what is happening to your son could happen to any of us.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next presenter is Rick Whitner, representing Caribou Mining Association. Hi, Rick.
Hi. Hello, my name is Rick Whitner, and I'm not only the president of the Caribou Mining Association, I'm president of the BC Placer Miners Association, which is an umbrella group of all the placer associations. I'm also here as a representative from the Quesnel Chamber of Commerce. 3 items I'd like to talk about. The first one is to allocate enough funding for recruitment, training, and retention of permitting staff in all of our resource ministries, to take out any of the fees that are paid to general revenue and put it back into the ministries responsible for permitting. Permitting for placer mining has gone from 60 days up to 240 days and even upwards to 20 months. We can no longer apply for a permit and work in the same year. Agriculture permits, such as water permits, take over 3 years. Sage Gordon spoke earlier. It took him 3 years to get his water permit. In a 2016 economic impact study conducted in the Caribou region showed that Placer spends over $122 million in their 5-month operating season. This affects most of the small businesses in the Caribou. The Atlan Placer Mining Association did similar studies, and they spend over $12 million in Atlan, which supports their local businesses. There's widespread placer operations throughout the province, such as the Prince George area, Mackenzie region, the Okanagan, and the Kootenays. There's agriculture throughout the entire province, which is our food source. Placer in 2021 paid over $4,274,000 in various fees, and this doesn't include income tax, PST, GST, carbon tax, and other applicable taxes. Please increase the budget so that we in small industry can operate with a functioning permitting system. Number 2, elimination of the carbon tax on purple fuels for industry and agriculture. Eliminate carbon tax on diesel fuels for transport trucks. Our industries have no option but to use diesel fuels. When the technology does catch up and there's some sort of electric heavy equipment, the price range will be far too high for us smaller industrial operators and agriculture to purchase. Last year, a friend of mine, a local contractor, purchased a mid-size 300 excavator, and it was over $500,000. So I can just imagine what an electronic vehicle will cost. The war in Ukraine has driven prices so high that many operations may have to shut down, causing layoffs and less economic revenue being spent. Eliminating the carbon tax may also help keep the doors open for these companies. Carbon tax not only increases inflation, especially here in the north, where our goods need to be freighted up. Why should we in the northwest and eastern areas be punished for being rural? Carbon tax on transport trucks also increases the cost of all items, which makes it difficult for our local and small businesses. The cost of getting our goods to market puts the cost out of the reach of many consumers and thus seriously hurting small local businesses. Please eliminate the carbon tax for us in the north so we can continue to operate and make a living. And number 3, most of our upgrading incentives for heating that we use in rural communities, such as wood-burning stoves, oil furnaces, and propane heating systems. This will allow us in the rural communities to lower our carbon footprint. Most of our province is composed of rural areas. Cache Creek, 100 Mile, Williams Lake, Quesnel, and North have less than 50% of our population base. Most of it is in outlying rural areas. We do not have natural gas in our outlying communities. We also have very cold winters. -20 is the normal temperature, and we often see -30 for weeks, and quite often dips down to -40. The incentives for heat pumps is not an option for us here. They do not function even at our lower temperature ranges during the winter. We either need to use wood, propane, or even heating oil. We need to have incentives to upgrade our heating systems that we can actually use. Newer wood stoves have catalytic converters which make them much more environmentally friendly. New oil furnaces are far more efficient, therefore lowering the carbon footprint. New propane furnaces have the lowest emissions of the 3 common heating systems. So please, in the upcoming budget, offer us in the rural communities incentives that we can actually use to help us become more environmentally friendly and lowering our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Henry.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Actually, just a few weeks ago, a group of students were talking about just transition in a way for us to move towards environmental friendlier strategy, but we had to take it by progressive steps instead of jumping from one point to the other. So I'm looking at a lot of your heating element, which we were referring to earlier, even though I think some of them might be viewed as not as environmentally friendly, but it's better than what currently we have right now.
Right.
So if you don't mind me, almost want to bouncing back, for rural community members, because today I'm just finally really have the opportunity to really appreciate rural living environment, that heating is actually one of the stronger expense part of our lifestyle.
Yes.
And by not having sufficient or adequate support, it could trap somebody in a poverty cycle and enable a lot of people to prosper the way where they live.
That's right.
So if you want to get a cover me, thank you.
Yeah.
Ben.
Thanks very much, Rick. I just wanted to go back to your very first point. You started off by talking about training and retention, and you talked about this length of time. Now, the ministry has allocated additional resources, but I just want to better understand this. How do we get to this point where we've gone from 60 days to 20 months in some cases for permitting? Is it just a loss of staff, or is it a case that there's other processes that have plugged up the system?
There's other processes. They actually turned over the permitting over to what they call front counter. And before, especially for Placer, they had one person of contact that would do all of our permits. And so if he seen that a permit was being stalled out, he would get on the phone or send an email out and make sure that it was being done correctly. And he was really efficient, and we had our permits within 60 days. Recently, government has now just changed. They've taken away the front counter, and they're now sending it directly to mines, but they aren't ready for it. And so they need, additional people in there, and we need proper training. And another thing that we see is there's a huge transition, especially the people who work in front counter, or if they work with First Nation consultants, that they're just a stepping stone. So every 6 months to a year, you're seeing new staff member comes in. So we'd like to see, incentives that they want to stay in those positions.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing Renee. I am seeing Renee.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Rick, for the presentation. I want to go to your recommendation number 2 and just talk about eliminating carbon tax on the purple fuels and diesel. How would that, is that enough of an affect for what we're seeing in this region in terms of what the fuels are costing?
It would be a start. Okay. Pre-pandemic, my partner and I, we spent about $50,000 a year on diesel fuel, and at the time we were paying about $800 in carbon tax, and so that was per month. And carbon tax has gone up, fuel prices have doubled, so you know, we'd be looking at spending probably closer to 150,000 a year on fuel. So, and that's one of the main reasons we're not mining this year, my partner and I, is because we can't afford the fuel.
Thank you for that.
I'm not seeing any other question. Oh, Ben.
Maybe I'll ask one question. We had a
Oh,
we
yes,
had a-
sorry.
We had a presentation earlier today in Terrace from the geothermal heating systems, and they were kind of cut out of the incentive system. Is that an option for some of the people that are using, you know, wood, oil, propane, et cetera? I mean, is it an option that if there was an incentive, do you think they'd consider it?
If the cost was something that, you know, people could afford.
Okay.
Because I know that involves drilling, and I know drilling isn't that cheap.
Yeah.
And it would depend on what the heating system would cost, that would be tied to that. But it would be definitely something to look at.
Okay, thanks very much.
Are there any other questions? With that, Rick, I want to thank you for presenting to us and reminding us that while we may all want to lower our carbon footprint, it isn't one size fits all. That what may work in one part of the province will not work in another part of the province. That's an important reminder. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to the Caribou.
Thank you
very much.
And our next and perhaps our last presenter today is Jordan Greer, representing Caribou Cattlemen.
Nice to see you guys all up here in the Caribou. Sure
Thank you.
appreciate it. I wish I could have rewrote this right now, because a lot of different topics have come up and it's made it maybe a little easier to talk about. So I thought I'd paint a little picture for everybody about the beef industry up here. So I'm the president, lucky enough to be the president of the Caribou Cattlemen's Association. I also have a family ranch. I'm the father of the next generation, and I hope they want to carry it on in this industry. We have a lot of small producers out here that work a full-time job on top of also being a rancher. And they contribute far beyond their means in this industry. It is just amazing to have those people. It's getting really hard to get the young prospects to get into this industry because they have to do the same thing. They're working a full-time job, they're paying tax on that, and they're trying to get into this at the highest price land that they can possibly get into an industry that at this point can barely sustain itself. With the high cost of fuel, it's been talked about already. I know this person personally, and he works like you would never believe, and he has such a passion for the industry, and all he wants to do is contribute, and he's having that thought right now that he doesn't think that he can keep doing this, and he works night and day. Without people like that, it's going to run its course. I come from a large family operation. We've been there for 30 years now. There's 4 generations there on the place. Between my grandparents, myself, my mother, my brother, and my kids. And we are very efficient. We are probably one of the most efficient operations around. And I can tell you, if we are having problems and we are struggling with this, I can't imagine anybody who is trying to get into this has a chance. We've had to make a lot of decisions as well. The price of wages, we have less people working. We have a lot less money to put into machinery repairs, and we run a lot of state-of-the-art equipment. It's hard to get everything paid for, get it all working, just because of the price of the fuel and everything else. The BSE, the fire, the flood, the drought, we've been able to get through all of it so far. All of us have. Anybody who's still in this industry. At this point, the price of cattle just does not reflect what we're getting. We are not able to, sustain at this current price. We are price takers, not price setters. We buy retail, sell wholesale, and pay for the transportation of our own product to get there. So we take a bit of a brunt of it for sure. we take care of a lot of, big areas of land that we try to really mitigate properly and be able to help with the wildfires with, grazing cattle through there. The more forage on the landscape, the more diversity in these forests, the easier, a lot of this would be to manage. There's so many long-term benefits to this that we can see because we're not only sustainable, but we're very adaptable as an industry. A few of the recommendations that we've come up with as an association for sure is to ensure the cumulative impacts of inflation on the ranching industry is factored into decisions about fees and tax increases. Example, water pricing, trying to deal with the water registrations, everything else. Fuel taxes and rebates, carbon tax offsets, specifically reducing the fuel taxes, the carbon tax. It would make such a benefit to us in this industry. Maybe put more emphasis on the carbon sequestration payment program. We all sequester carbon in this industry. It just depends how you want to look at it. We are adding to the soil every day if it's managed properly. The Caribou Cattlemen's Association has survived by delivering federal and provincial programs. The more funding we can get for that kind of stuff, we can try to engage our people back into this. We're losing a lot of our people, in our own associations. With the cancellation of the Climate Action Initiative, a lot of the members that put so much work into it, it kind of just got by the wayside. It's done now. Without the revenue for the programs and whatnot, it'll be hard for our association to carry on. And really, the education part of this for us is a big piece of this to try to get this to go forward. But I can honestly say from the cattlemen's perspective and from my own perspective on my own outfit, it's really hard to try to be innovative and try to be engaged in any of this with just the amount that's just coming down the pipe at us at this point. It's getting pretty costly.
Thank you, Jordan. We have a number of committee members who've already indicated they'd like to ask you some questions. Megan, Renee, Henry, and Brenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. It really is the only industry, I know my father regularly says it's the only one where you're working all day to feed someone else's family while taking a second job to feed your own. But I mean, I think most of us are there because we love it, but the obstacles right now really are becoming quite insurmountable. The federal and provincial program delivery that your organization received funds for program delivery. Are there any past ones that you can provide as an example for the committee that were quite successful in providing revenue, and any thoughts on ones that maybe the government should look at setting up that would even engage youth?
See, I can't at this point, but I imagine my colleague could very quickly.
Well, some of the wildlife mitigation programs for one. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say the wildlife mitigation program for sure.
And climate action, and now whatever's taking its place, which is a suite of best management practices under environmental farm planning. Any of this which is focused on carbon or lowering footprints. And the problem we have is that if we don't have industry capacity, government doesn't have on-the-ground partners to create realism and effectiveness. And if you look back on the programs, climate action programs, it has really helped us sustain industry capacity and build it.
Any, and just the second part of my question that I asked Madam Chair, if it's okay, were there any that really engaged youth in the past that would have brought them forward, that allowed youth to become involved in the program delivery?
I think I can honestly say maybe specifically right now my children are in like the 4-H part of this. There is nothing better than that for these kids to get into agriculture. Nothing.
No, I had two in mind go through it, and you're right, spot on.
We have a caribou, maiden interior program at TRU, the Applied Sustainable Ranching Program.
Yep.
Runs on a shoestring. Came at the initiative of Caribou Cattlemen after looking internally, saying we have to engage people, and now we've put some 100 people through, and they are business ready and they're environmentally ready to go into the business.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Renee, then Henry, then Brenda.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that presentation and your passion for this industry and cause, and literally our food security. My question might be somewhat out of just ignorance, but I'm having a hard time understanding why there is such a low price for calves and yet such a high price in the grocery stores for meat, in particular beef. So is it just that we haven't caught up yet for where the supply will be once we don't have those calves growing into cows, or what am I missing?
There is quite a bottleneck there when it comes from the producing the animal to the packing plants to the consumer. But right now, the cost of the feed is astronomical, so you're not getting the price for those calves because they don't want to pay that amount for those calves when the cost of the feed is up here and the price of the calf is up here. There's no margin for the next piece, right? Like me as a cow calf, I sell to the feeders, so then they're fed to finish, and then from there they're processed for food consumption, right? So every piece there, it's about feeding them efficiently, cost to gain. It just trickles right down, right from the top down.
Thank you.
Henry.
I'll make it quick. Thank you so much for your presentation and your fight for food security and water security too. I'm going to piggyback up what Renee was asking us a question I'm concerned about. Who is setting the price officially? Bear with my ignorance.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that because we're all very confused on this at this point. But basically, it's the packers set the price of this. So it's whatever the consumer's willing to pay so much. It's all supply and demand. It's not just our industry, it's the same. But there's quite a gap right now between what the packers are getting and what the price of the beef is, like the price of the cattle actually is. And I can say it's not helping right now to put a label on ground beef. That's not going to do anything for anybody, especially for the right off the gate cow-calf, home-raised beef. That will really affect what happens right at ground level.
Well, Jordan, we are out of time, but I want to thank you for, you said in the beginning that you were setting out to paint us a picture. And I want to tell you that you painted a very detailed, very clear picture that gives us some insight into what your industry is going through. And
thank you all.
It's a problem, yes. Thank you very much. That's it.
Probably could, yeah.
We have no more presenters tonight, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming and sharing with us this evening.
Thank you.